The bustling airport terminal was filled with the usual chaos. People rushing, phones ringing, and announcements echoing overhead. But as the line for first-class boarding began to move, a young black woman stood in the middle of it, her heart racing. She had just been told she couldn't board with the other passengers in first class. She was given a cold, dismissive smile by the gate agent, who told her to step aside. "Sorry, miss." "First class is for paying customers," the agent said, her tone dripping with judgment. Confusion washed over her face. She had purchased a first-class ticket, hadn't she? But before she could argue, the gate agent turned away, ignoring her. The woman stood frozen. The feeling of being invisible, unworthy, and overlooked wasn't new to her. It had followed her through life. People doubting her, dismissing her, thinking she didn't belong. But what the agent didn't know was that the woman's father was the founder and owner of the very airline she was being denied access to. She had grown up with it, loved it, and, more importantly, owned it. As she stood there, with the world feeling like it was crumbling around her, something shifted. She wasn't just a passenger anymore. She was about to teach everyone in that airport a lesson they'd never forget. Before we jump into today's story, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. If you love powerful stories of justice, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share, so you never miss what's coming next. Now, let's get started. Her name was Maya Johnson. At first glance, she looked like just another traveler, clad in a simple navy blue jacket, her hair neatly pulled back, and a small suitcase in hand. But if you looked closely, you'd see the fire burning in her eyes, the determination that set her apart from everyone else. Maya had always been underestimated. People saw her as quiet, humble, and easy to dismiss. A young woman from a modest background trying to make her way in a world that was always too eager to judge her. She was often told that she didn't belong, whether in the boardrooms where she fought for respect, or in society where her worth was constantly questioned. But Maya was not like the others. Beneath her calm exterior was a mind that never stopped, a heart that never gave up. She was a woman of grit, of unspoken strength, and even though the world had written her off, she was far from invisible. She had always known the truth. Her family's name carried weight. Her father's legacy in the airline industry was unmatched, and his reach stretched far beyond the business world. But Maya had always kept her connection to him a secret, choosing instead to fight for her own identity in a world that often didn't let her define herself. The people who underestimated her didn't realize how much they were about to regret it. As Maya stood in the terminal, the agent's dismissive words still echoing in her ears, she felt the stirrings of something within her, something that had been building for years. Maya wasn't just a passenger on this flight. She was about to reclaim her place in a world that had never quite seen her for who she truly was. And now, as her eyes locked onto the gate agent's indifferent face, Maya knew it was time to stop playing by their rules. Time to remind them that sometimes the biggest surprises come from those you least expect. The gate agent's eyes flicked over Maya once more, her judgment as sharp as a blade. "I'm sorry, miss, but you'll have to wait for the next flight. First class isn't for everyone," she repeated, dismissing Maya with a wave of her hand. Maya's heart pounded in her chest. She had seen this before. People treating her like she was invisible, as if her presence didn't matter. But this time, it was different. This wasn't just an ignorant remark or rude gesture. It was a deep, humiliating reminder of how the world saw her. She was being denied something that was rightfully hers, not because of any mistake she made, but simply because of who they thought she was. The murmurs around her grew louder. Some passengers were watching with curiosity, others with disdain, but none of them understood what was happening. Maya clenched her jaw, the anger building inside her. She had worked too hard, fought too many battles to let this moment slip away. "Excuse me, but I bought a first-class ticket," Maya said, her voice steady, though the tremble of frustration was hard to hide. "I'm not going to wait in the back of the plane." The agent didn't even look up from her tablet as she tapped a few keys. "You didn't make the cut," she replied coldly, clearly in no mood to entertain any further conversation. Maya could feel the sting of the words, each one digging deeper, as if they were trying to strip away every ounce of confidence she had left. She was used to being underestimated, but this was an insult she couldn't simply ignore. The injustice was unbearable. Her eyes darted to the other passengers. Some were glancing at her, some were whispering behind their hands, but none of them dared to step in or question the authority of the gate agent. They were all too comfortable with the way things were. Maya took a slow breath, her hand gripping the strap of her bag. She could feel her pulse quicken as she thought about how often people had doubted her, in school, in business meetings, in her community. But none of that compared to the sting of this moment. They had written her off because of her race, her gender, her name. They assumed she didn't belong in the same space as them, that her seat was reserved for someone more worthy. But Maya wasn't just anyone. And as her eyes met the gate agent's again, a thought crossed her mind, a thought she'd been running from for years. Maya wasn't just going to take this lying down. She was done being silent. Maya stood there for a moment, the weight of the gate agent's words sinking in. She had always played by the rules, kept her head down, and silently carried the burdens life handed her. But today was different. As she glanced around the terminal, something inside her clicked. She wasn't the timid woman everyone thought she was. She wasn't someone who would just bow her head and accept the world's unfair treatment. Maya's father had built this empire with blood, sweat, and tears, and she wasn't going to let some random agent erase the legacy that ran through her veins. She wasn't just any passenger. Maya was about to show them just who she was. For years, she had kept her family's legacy a secret. Her father's success in the airline industry was no accident. He was a visionary, a self-made mogul, and Maya had been his closest ally from the very beginning. She had worked alongside him on every project, behind closed doors where no one could see her. She had built her own reputation in the shadows of his success, never asking for recognition, always striving to prove her worth on her own terms. But now, standing at the gate, Maya could no longer hide. The world would soon learn that she wasn't just another nobody they could ignore. Without another word, Maya took out her phone. Her fingers moved quickly, the familiar app opening in an instant. She dialed her father's personal assistant, someone who had been with the family for years, and within seconds, the message was sent. The call was made. "Dad, it's Maya. They won't let me board the first-class flight." She didn't need to explain further. Her father knew the gravity of the situation. He always did. As she waited, Maya's heart thudded in her chest, but it wasn't fear she felt. It was the rush of finally stepping into her true role, the one she had kept hidden for far too long. The agent, still oblivious to the woman standing before her, began to tap her screen again, her attitude as cold as ever. "We're going to have to move you to the next flight," she said, ignoring Maya's growing intensity. But just as Maya's hand tightened around the phone, she heard the voice she had been waiting for. "Maya!" It was her father's assistant. "He knows about the situation. We'll take care of it." In that instant, Maya felt a shift. The agent's attitude, the whispers of the other passengers, the doubt in the air, everything suddenly felt small. She wasn't just Maya Johnson, the woman they thought didn't belong in first class. She was about to remind them that sometimes the most powerful people are the ones you never see coming. The seconds felt like hours as Maya stood in front of the gate agent, her phone still in her hand, her mind racing. She could see the agent typing something into the system, clearly annoyed at having to deal with someone who wasn't following the rules. Maya's heart beat faster, not from fear, but from the deep, growing realization that the moment was coming. The weight of her family's legacy wasn't just a thing of the past, it was a force that would soon be unleashed. As she stood there, Maya scanned the terminal, her eyes scanning the faces of the other passengers. Some of them looked at her with curiosity, others with quiet judgment. A few seemed to recognize her from somewhere. maybe from a news story about her father or the occasional business feature, but no one approached her. No one dared to ask. They had no idea who she really was, and that was about to change. Maya's phone buzzed again. It was a text this time. Her father's assistant had sent her a single line. "He's on his way." Maya's breath hitched. That was all it took. Her father, the very man who owned this airline, was on his way to handle the situation himself. The power of his name alone could bring the whole terminal to a standstill. But Maya wasn't just going to let him fix it. She wasn't a helpless bystander. This was her moment to take control, to show the world what they had all overlooked. The gate agent's gaze flicked over her phone for a brief second, dismissing it like it was nothing, before turning back to her screen. "I'm sorry, miss. You'll have to move to the back of the line. First class is for our most loyal customers." Maya held back a smirk. She had heard that line too many times to count. It wasn't about loyalty. It was about power, about who held the keys to the gates and who had to beg to get through them. And Maya had seen this before in the boardrooms, in the corridors of power, and now it was happening right in front of her eyes. The more Maya thought about it, the clearer it became. This wasn't just about an airline or a first-class seat. It was about the deeper injustice that so many people of her background faced every single day. The system was built on exclusion, on making people feel small, insignificant. But today, Maya was about to flip the script. Just as the gate agent began to speak again, Maya's phone rang. Her heart skipped a beat when she saw the caller ID, her father's assistant. Without missing a beat, she answered it. "Maya, they're coming," the assistant said, her voice calm but urgent. "Your father is on his way, and the entire security team has been briefed. They'll take care of the situation. It's time." Maya could feel the power shift in the air like a storm gathering in the distance. The agent had no idea what was about to happen, but Maya did. This wasn't just about a first-class seat anymore. This was about making a statement. With a deep breath, Maya stepped forward, her voice unwavering as she spoke to the gate agent once more. "I'll be boarding now," she said, the words heavy with unspoken authority. The agent blinked, caught off guard by the certainty in her voice. But before she could respond, the terminal doors burst open, and two of her father's security guards stepped into the area, their eyes scanning the room with the kind of authority that made everyone take notice. And in that moment, Maya knew the tide had turned. The terminal went silent. The murmur of voices that had filled the air moments ago now seemed distant, swallowed by the gravity of the moment. Everyone turned their heads as the two security guards, broad-shouldered and dressed in sharp suits, walked toward the gate. Their eyes locked onto the gate agent, and suddenly, the atmosphere felt charged with an unspoken understanding. Maya stood tall, her chest rising with a slow breath, feeling the weight of her decision, and the power that came with it. The gate agent's face paled as she recognized the guards. She looked at Maya, clearly confused, her fingers nervously tapping on the counter. The room seemed to hold its breath as the tension reached a boiling point. "Maya Johnson?" one of the guards asked, his voice smooth but firm. "Yes," Maya replied, her voice steady, her heart racing with a mix of triumph and anticipation. "I'll be boarding now." The guard nodded once, his gaze never leaving the agent, and then turned to the rest of the security team standing just outside the gate. "Clear the path." Before anyone could comprehend what was happening, the second guard stepped forward, placing a hand gently on the gate agent's shoulder. "You need to let her board. Now." The gate agent's mouth opened, but no words came out. Her expression was a mixture of shock, disbelief, and fear, as if the world she knew had just been shattered. Maya could feel her pulse quicken, not because of fear, but because she had finally taken control of her own story. The woman who had been dismissed as out of place, the woman who had been rejected by society, was now standing in the center of it all, no longer a silent observer, but an undeniable force. Just as the security team began to clear the path, a loud voice rang through the terminal, cutting through the silence like a thunderclap. "You heard them," a man's voice boomed. Maya didn't even need to look up. She knew that voice. It was her father's, and the mere sound of it was enough to make the room freeze. The crowd parted, and there he was. Charles Johnson, the founder and CEO of the Airline, dressed in a sharp suit, his presence commanding the attention of everyone around him. He walked toward Maya with the confidence of a man who had built an empire from the ground up. No one dared to question him. Maya didn't flinch, but her heart swelled with something else: gratitude, pride, and a deep sense of justice. She wasn't just his daughter, she was her own person, capable of standing up for herself. But knowing her father had her back in this moment, when it mattered the most, filled her with an unshakable sense of strength. Charles walked up to the gate agent, his eyes narrowing. "I think you've made a mistake. My daughter will be boarding that first-class seat," he said, his voice unwavering. The agent, visibly trembling now, nodded quickly. "Of course, Mr. Johnson. I had no idea." "You never do," Maya's father interrupted coldly. "You're too quick to judge, too quick to assume who belongs where." His gaze shifted to the surrounding passengers who were watching the scene unfold with a mix of shock and awe. "Let this be a lesson to all of you," he continued, his voice rising now. "Don't ever make the mistake of thinking someone's worth is defined by the color of their skin or the seat they sit in." Maya felt a rush of emotions flood her chest as her father's words echoed in the room. She had always known he was a man of integrity, a man who believed in lifting others up, but to see him stand beside her in this moment was a revelation. It wasn't just about power, it was about justice, about what was right. As her father turned to her with a proud smile, Maya finally stepped forward, the gate agent now moving aside to let her through. She was no longer the underdog. She wasn't the quiet woman trying to prove her worth. She had already proven it. Maya Johnson wasn't just a passenger. She was a force to be reckoned with. As Maya stepped onto the plane, she could feel the weight of the eyes on her. The passengers who had once whispered behind her back now watched in stunned silence as she passed. No one moved, no one spoke, and for the first time in her life, Maya felt like she truly belonged. Not because of the seat she sat in, but because she had finally claimed her place in the world. The door to the first-class cabin closed behind her, and Maya sank into her seat, her breath steadying as she gazed out the window. The world outside was still moving, still rushing by, but for a moment everything had stopped. It was a moment of clarity. She had crossed a threshold, not just in the airport but in her own life. No longer would she let others define her, limit her, or tell her where she could or couldn't go. She had found her own voice, her own strength. In the back of her mind, she knew this wouldn't be the last time she'd face adversity. She had spent her entire life fighting for respect, and she would continue to do so. But now, she was different. The world had seen her for who she truly was, and nothing could ever take that away from her. Maya's phone buzzed again and she glanced at the screen. It was a message from her father's assistant. "Well done, Maya. Your father is proud." But Maya knew the truth. She wasn't just proud of herself because of what her father had done for her. She was proud because she had stood up for herself, for the injustice she had faced, and had turned the tide. As the plane ascended, soaring high above the clouds, Maya looked out the window one last time. The view was breathtaking, and for the first time she saw the world in a new light. She wasn't just a passenger on this journey. She was the one in control, and she was ready to take on whatever came next. Never let anyone decide your worth for you. It's not the labels, the judgments, or the assumptions others place on you that define who you are. It's your strength, your resilience, and your ability to rise above the noise. When the world tries to put you in a box, break free, because you are the one who writes your own story, and the world is waiting to see what you're truly capable of. Thank you for watching. Maya's story reminds us that standing up for what's right can create lasting change. Whether it's overcoming adversity or challenging injustice, your voice matters. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment with your thoughts on the story. Let's keep this conversation going. And remember, sharing these stories helps spread the message of justice and fairness, one act of courage at a time. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it today.